What's going on, guys? This is my open spoiler review for a movie called Man Thing. The Man Thing is a movie that came out in the early 2000s. It came up after Blade, after um, X-Men, after Spider-Man. These are the three movies that changed comic book movies forever. Now, this is also a movie that came out after the 1980s 89 Batman movie. It came out around the same time as Spider-Man 2 and Batman Begins. So comic book movies have definitely progressed in the right way. But this is not one of those movies. This movie is a hard watch. Um, I'm still thankful for this movie a little bit because it gave us Kevin Feige. I would say he worked in, X-Men and Spider-Man, and he did a lot of movies. But I feel like this was like his movie that no one else knows about except those hardcore fans. And with Halloween coming up, I wanted a movie that was a superhero movie because that's just what I'm into, mixed with a little bit of horror elements. And I've never actually watched this movie, and I just wanted to see what it's about. It's a Kevin Feige film, and it's a Marvel film, and it's about this really cool monster creature that showed up in Werewolf by Night, and he seemed really cool. And with all that happening, a lot of people tend to talk about it. It's like, oh yeah, that movie. So I wanted to check it out. Um, and I hated this movie. I didn't even get to watch it. I would per se. Um, as soon as as soon as it opens, it doesn't feel like a 2000 superhero movie or a modern superhero movie or even a 90s superhero movie. It doesn't feel like a superhero movie at all. It feels like a Friday the 13th meets a monster movie. It feels like an 80s horror movie. To break it down, just the visual of the camera looks old. And then you have this group of teenagers on this beach, and two of the teenagers go run off for some fun time, and they're in this swamp and they're on this boat just going down the swamp, and then one of the characters dies and you don't even see the monster. And then from that moment you're like, okay, I'm starting to get the vibe. This is more of an 80s, not really a superhero movie, but more of an 80s horror film. Okay, kind of like a Friday the 13th. And then from their deaths, you switch protagonist to a 30-year-old sheriff that's new to this town that has to find all these missing teens. Now that seems normal, but for the 80 horror films, usually um, teens are your full-time main characters. Your full cast are usually all teens. Now that we have an older, he's a younger gentleman who's older than these teenagers now, and it gets boring. His first thing he does is he goes to this group of protesters, and it just gets boring. You forget why they're there, what they're protesting, something about the swamp and this Indian burial ground, and there's some weird stuff with the Native Americans in the middle, and there's some weird romance with the sheriff and the girl who was protesting with her buddies, and it's just so odd. I don't feel anything really fits together. It feels like two very separate, different movies. And then the only time we get to see the monster is from a POV. We get to see his point of view with this weird tint of him looking at people while he's in the swamp. It's just weird. It gets it gets really boring in the middle, and I got distracted. I was on my phone, I was on YouTube or TikTok, or I was, texting my girlfriend. I just was not interested in watching a superhero movie and a horror movie mixed into one, and it was boring. And when I caught back up, I put my phone down and I was watching it. It's about 20 minutes left. This is an hour and a half movie. I watched about the first 30 minutes and maybe the last 20 minutes, and I was very confused, but I didn't care. What I watched is there was some weird Indian burial ground in the swamp, and they're about to blow up this rig that was probably like an oil rig or something. And then the cop is there trying to stop these guys from blowing up the rig, and then the 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 man thing comes in, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, who is this guy?" And like, they're like, "We this is the only time we see the actual title character of the entire movie." And they're like, "Oh crap, let's blow up this oil rig that we tried to stop to kill this monster." They blow up the rig. The monster just disappears. We don't see a body. At least I don't think we've seen a body. I don't know. I was excited ish to see this movie, and I was very disappointed. I didn't care enough. I didn't even care to take it out and put it in the case. I just left it in there for a couple days until I wanted to watch a different movie. And it was hard. And I was excited because the Werewolf by Night movie was really decent. I was interested in this Man Thing character. Swamp Thing is a very prominent character for DC. He has about 2 movies and a couple TV shows, and he's made cameos and animated stuff. And I believe that Man Thing actually came out as a character before Swamp Thing, so I was very interested to see. And this movie was just horrific. It was, I can't even. So if you were like me and you want to watch a Marvel or a DC movie, and you want to, but you also want to get hyped up for Halloween, I don't recommend this movie. I would watch something. I would recommend Morbius. I like Morbius. I would recommend the Venom movies, the Ghost Rider movies, uh, any of the Blade movies. A lot of people don't like Trinity. I like Trinity. I think all three are great, but definitely the first two are fantastic. I would recommend the Tim Burton Batman movies. Basically, any Batman movie is appropriate for Halloween, especially the new Robert Pattinson one that actually takes place in October, time for Halloween. Um, I would also recommend Batman versus Dracula. It's a fantastic animated movie. Um, I would recommend Constantine. They're talking about making a second one. Constantine, also another movie that I think I fell asleep to it, but it was also it was decent. I would also recommend Spawn. I've actually never watched Spawn, so I love to review that one day. But I heard it's fantastic. It's a '90s movie. Um, I heard Spawn is fantastic, so I'm very excited to see that. I hope I don't get as disappointed as this. Lastly, I think I would recommend Hellboy. There's 3 of those movies, and there's animated stuff, and I think all of those movies are more appropriate for Halloween um, than Man Thing. And I'm sure there's more. Um, there's definitely more. I think those are just the ones that I can remember. Um, you can also add something like The Punisher in there, but I just wouldn't recommend this movie per se. I I would watch Werewolf by Night on Disney Plus. I would recommend that. That was decent. A lot of people love it. Um, yeah, just I wouldn't recommend this. I don't know what happened. I don't know if there's a studios thing or there was some comic book stuff or changes, and I don't know what it was. I just didn't think anything matched. I feel like the middle was boring, and it was very confusing, and not a lot of it made any sense.